So Derrick Rose has been great this year. We all know this. The question is, what is he going to be worth in the open market? Because he's got 1 year left. He's having clearly his best season in a long time. And I think, depending on what teams look at him as, whether it's a starting point guard or a sixth man, on top of how much the T-Wolves want to bring him back, could dictate where he ends up. And I guess the first thing we can talk about is, can Derrick Rose maintain this, right? Well, the jump shot may be legit because of how confident he looks when he's taking them. His form is a little different. I still can't pinpoint exactly what it is. To be fair, I haven't researched it that much, but there's definitely more balance, more lift to it seems. And he's not just making standstill threes. I mean, he's not shooting too many. It's about 3.5 a game, but perhaps he could even improve on this as he gets older, to where by the time he's like 32, he could be making shooting about 4 to maybe 5 threes a game, and that can be a big difference. And of course, he's still beating guys off the dribble, and while his dunks are never going to be a thing again, his savviness on offense, his burst is still there, and it's working out. I mean, he's actually shooting the most free throws in a little while in his career as well, so this is all good stuff. Now, I guess there's a chance his three-pointer could dip a little down, because he is shooting 46%, which is pretty wild, so I could picture some teams being hesitant of that. I could picture the T-Wolves being hesitant of that as well. But regardless, the dude is still the best that he's been in a while, and he can create offense for you. The Wolves' offense, with him not in the game, at least for a decent stretch of this season, was pretty bad. You also look at, with how Wiggins has been, well, he's been Andrew Wiggins. The T-Wolves do need another source of offense who can really create stuff besides Karl Anthony Towns, and right now, Derrick Rose is probably that guy. I mean, if you look at Wiggins' recent games, he's had in his last 8 games, he's had 7 of around 15 points doing his normal blah playmaking and blah rebounding, and I mean, he is who he is, you know? So getting that guaranteed offensive option with D Rose can be nice. I do suspect that Jeff Teague will accept his player option of $19 million. You could argue Derrick Rose has been better than Jeff Teague this year. I don't even think it's an argument. I think it's a very safe bet. I mean, Jeff Teague's efficiency has been awful. His playmaking has been legit, but still, I think D Rose is having the better season, so that could be another reason for why the T-Wolves would want to bring back Derrick Rose, is there may not be a guarantee that Jeff Teague is good anymore. Now, what would it cost to actually bring D Rose back? Well, the Wolves, as of right now, if they let everybody walk except for D Rose, they would be at $110 million in salary. The luxury tax is $132 million, so that does give you about, $22 million to play with in re-signing the guy. I don't think it's going to take that much to keep him. Now, we should remember, Taj Gibson is a free agent. He matters a lot for this team, and I think he's still one of the more valuable, lower usage dudes in the league, but he is going to be 34, and maybe some other team would like him way more than the Wolves do. Something I am going to talk about a little later, but I guess I can mention it now. I think it depends on whether Tibbs is going to be here long term. I mean, they do have Saric, who plays the same position as Taj does. So that's all something to remember. And I actually think what other teams see Derrick Rose as could be what the Wolves end up paying him. Because if teams see him as a sixth man, like a Lou Williams type of guy, then I think we could see him getting somewhere between 8 to 9 and potentially $13 million. I mean, what did Tyreek Evans get this offseason from the Pacers? He got about 12.5, so that could be about that ballpark. You could argue that Lou Williams accepting that smaller contract a couple years back hurt the Derrick Roses of the world, but unfortunately this is where it's at. But if teams see D Rose as a starting point guard, then we could see him getting upwards of 15 to 17 million a year, something like that. Now, in my opinion, I think if Derrick Rose is going to keep on making threes, I don't really care whether he starts or comes off the bench. assuming his defense is not a disaster, because that just opens up the offense so much, right? I mean, his playmaking is not far away from where it was in that 2017 year with the Knicks, where some people think Derrick was amazing. The big difference is the shooting, because the spacing is better, and he's not reliant on a million pull-up mid-rangers and a million just like drives that don't really go anywhere. So I think he can be a productive offensive player whether he's starting or coming off the bench. But at the same time, perhaps there's a little bit more comfort for him coming off the bench, knowing that he can focus on his jump shot or his scoring overall a little bit more, whereas if you're a starting point guard, I think there's a little bit more of a responsibility to not take over at all times. But again, I think as long as the three is real, I could picture him being successful in either thing. Now, if we can look at some teams out there who I think could consider making him an offer. The Indiana Pacers are very interesting. They have a lot of guys coming off the books. I don't think they need all of them. This offseason, again, they did sign Tyreke Evans, and he has not worked out for them, but maybe they would want another guy like that, and perhaps Derrick Rose could just be a better version of Tyreke. I actually thought for 10 seconds about the Bulls. I guess the holdup would be if you think he and Zach LaVine can't really play together. And if you think Chris Dunn can be a starting point guard, I don't think he can be because of his offense, but that team does need some scoring. Phoenix, of course, we all know they're looking for a point guard if they don't want to commit to the Devin Booker thing. I mean, this team definitely needs some help scoring. I just fear that between D. Rose, TJ Warren, Devin Booker, those are three guys who, sure, they all can shoot, but they don't want to just play off the ball. Like, they want to have the ball in their hands and they want to create. And depending on how good of a coach Kokoshkov is, perhaps he could actually make that work, but I don't know. I think it's still too early to really know how good he is. The Orlando Magic, a team that is always in need of some more offensive punch. If Anthony Davis actually stays with the Pelicans, I could picture them going for D. Rose. They're going to have to re-sign Mirotic if Anthony Davis is going to accept that extension. And then you'd have about $21 million to re-sign Mirotic and sign Derrick Rose. Could potentially happen if you got off of like Jahlil Okafor and Frank Jackson and Kenrich Williams' money, then that could allow you to get there. That would push Drew Holiday back to full-time 2, which I think we would all agree that's when he's at his best. So yeah, there's a few teams for you. One other thing I think we should talk about is the T-Wolves have one thing that a lot of NBA teams don't, which is they have a guy who could go down as the best offensive center ever in Karl Anthony Towns, who can bomb threes and go off the dribble and be a terror in transition, play the pick and roll, the pick and pop, and I'm sure that is benefiting Derrick Rose. Now, to be nice to Derrick, if you look at his lineup numbers without Karl Anthony Towns, they're still pretty good. But we can't act like Towns doesn't have a big impact. I mean, those two have played 650 minutes together this year. So if Derrick goes to some other team that has more of a rim-oriented 5, then that could hurt the spacing. And while Derrick has improved his outside jumper and his mid-range, I think is still pretty good, he does still drive to the basket quite a lot. So I think that is something to care about for any team that is considering taking him on. If I can go back to the T-Wolves for a moment here, another thing that I would believe that they will care about is that Dario Saric's contract is up after next season. What do they value more? Is it 30-year-old Derrick Rose or 24-year-old Dario Saric? Saric definitely on the trajectory of Towns and Wiggins' deals, but hey, D. Rose has been good. Now, I believe the cap is going to go up again after next season. Yeah, it's going to end up at $118 million in 2021, so that will give them some extra breathing room to keep both of those guys, and maybe that's what will end up happening. Another thing I think we should point out is Derrick Rose is definitely Thibodeau's guy, And we don't know if Tibbs is going to be on this team past this year. I know everybody wanted to say that he was going to get fired after this Jimmy Butler trade, but given that the team has shown some life here since the Jimmy Butler trade, maybe Tibbs will still be here. And if Tibbs is still here, I have to guess that would help Derrick Rose's case for being on this team. But if the front office decides to go in a different direction, then perhaps they would not see Derrick Rose in their future plans. There's a whole bunch of things that go into this, but I think what we have to remember is Derrick Rose has been good, and he is going to be on an NBA team next year, and he's going to be getting paid a decent amount more than, what is his current contract? $2.1 million. Yeah, safe to say he's going to get a bit more of a payday than that. So we'll see what happens.